uh, for the futures. I think there is that. I would assume based on is it nine? Yeah, nine. Let's jump into it. So yesterday's rally did continue. I was expecting this to resolve, right? The overbought conditions we were expecting this to get resolved before our next move higher. Did not happen. This continued. So very likely scenario today. Upside right about here, 4087. Actually, let's go here and let's go SPX. So this is the XPX chart, and yesterday we were expecting it to get up to here, and that cleared on the ES chart. We're expecting it to hit this number, right? 4058, 4057, 4058. 50 basically, the 50 on the day. That was the idea. Now, if it clears here, then you have the second standard deviation to get tested about 4110. After that, right about here at 4128, 4130 area. Right, so this is the next target. Now, however, it will take time for that to get tested simply because this thing is getting overbought. Very likely scenario, the immediate trade is the 5. If that breaches, then the 8, about 4075 area. So give or take about 7 points to the downside, and about 5 points to the upside, right? That's the immediate trade if you're into that. And the mean is sitting all the way down here at 4064. I'm assuming that if it does breach the 8 here on the hour, ESM will likely come back down here into this number first, 4068. That breaches very likely scenario 4064 area, 4064, 4065 area will get tested. So yeah, looking forward for that. This needs to get resolved. This needs to get resolved. However, we'll look into Apple in a minute, but let's go into SPX chart here. SPX, right about here. This is what I'm looking to get tested today. It should have happened probably in the overnight session itself. It not happened. 4050, right? I think it is testing 4050 right now. It is testing 4050. Although you can't see any level here for ES, but this right now is getting tested, and this is where you're finding that resistance come from. And ES is unable to move beyond this 4080 area. 4080 to 40 sorry 40 yeah 44 4080 to 4083 area. So yeah, SPX is hitting this resistance right now. Very likely SPX will open here, and if it moves to the upside, then you'll start to see SPX hit this number right about here. That would mean it would be in touch with the second standard deviation, and that's basically how it should work. Come back down, violate the second standard deviation, move up and hit the second standard deviation, probably violate the second standard deviation and start to move to the downside, which is right here. So I am thinking that very likely SPX will breach this 4050 area. Then very likely it's going to go hit this 4060, 4062 area. And very likely scenario, we'll see another breather from there. How deep of a breather? Probably again, it will come back down into this line here at 4050. And then after that, we'll see where the 5 and 8 would lie. And based on that, we will go back onto the lower time frames and we'll track ES based on that, right? 5, 8, and then push to the downside. If 8 breaches 4068, then very likely 4064, 4065. This is the basic idea for the day. And to the upside, if let's say SPX breaches this line about 4062, then in real time, we'll start to consider this number to the upside then. 4109 to 4120 area, and that would be about 2% from where it closed yesterday, or better than 2% actually, about close to 100% move. I am not anticipating this. I'm not really anticipating a move all the way up into 4120, 4125. Um, Realistic, not really for the day. Probably, unless you see something really weird happening, that US 10 starts to die or something like that, or Apple starts to push to that 165. In a minute, we'll get into Apple. But if that happens, Apple and Microsoft both have that upper threshold. I forgot the number from Microsoft, but Apple, I remember about 165.40 area. So let's say if Apple pushes into that 165.40 on the week, then likely it's scenarios that you'll see this thing get accomplished. 4120 area. However, likelihood, this is where it will open right now, 41.8, 40, 50, 41, 40, 52 area. That clears about here. Very likely scenario, it will take a breather between this line to second standard deviation, 4060 to 4063 area, 4060 to 4064 area. Within this number, it should take a breather. After the breather, let's see how deep of a breather that would be. And uh, and I will again, I'm trying to reiterate my thought here. At here, it will open and probably it will hit this number, or it will start to come back down from here itself. Uh, that very likely, then I'll go down on this chart and start plotting the 5, 8, and we know the scenario here. Or I can go down onto this chart and probably trade here with the 5 and 8, and if that breaches the mean right about here, right? So yeah, that's how I'm looking at things right now. Okay, and ESM to the upside. Yeah, let's see that clear. Then likely scenario, this 41.25 on, so another 40 points from here, another 1%. So that would be about 1.5, 1.6% on the day. As of now, this is not what I'm looking at. However, in real time, if SPX crosses about that 40.63, 40.64 area, then let's start to plot into that 40.80, 40.90 area. Cool. Now, let's come back to Apple. And this is the chart that I am following right now for Apple. And this is what I was talking about, 165.30, 165.40 area, right? So if Apple starts to push to the upside and goes all the way through into this resistance, uh, by the way, it is violating the second standard deviation on the week, and it is getting overbought. So I don't know where that sell-off will come into, but as of now, not looking at that. As of now, not looking at a deeper sell-off. If it were to happen, probably they've seen that start right now. But as of now, uh, there is no selling coming in. However, there is put buying going on. There are longer dated puts that are being bought. Um, I don't know how much of an impact that will have, how much of a drag that will create on the SPX, but right now that's the scenario. However, even though the puts are being bought, what is happening right now? I am in the 5200 calls, November, December. I'm in 4800 calls, November, December, August. All of those are up anywhere between 10 to 30%. All of them are up anywhere between 10 to 30%. So on the other side of things, that is happening, right? The calls are appreciating pretty decent right now. So on the flip side, the longer dated puts, those are getting crushed, right? So that is happening right now. But the call buying, June, later June, that put buying is happening, uh, and also the premiums have come down. So I think the put buying is still happening there. Cool. So Apple, very likely if it starts to move up, so another 5 points from where it is right now, give or take. I don't know if this will happen today, but if it does happen, very likely people will start to dump Apple right about here. This will get overbought. Very likely, this will also get overbought, and very likely we'll see a breather, a deep of a breather. Likely scenario, if it hits that, then it will come back into second standard deviation. And very likely, if that breaches, again the five will get tested. Note that the five has moved up on the week here, right? The five was down here on 54 area. It has moved up, and it technically did test that. The price did not come down. The technicals moved up, right? So that means there is still strength in that. So to the downside, this is still the area that you want to watch, 156.50 area, and to the upside, 165.50 area. This is what about 10-point range for Apple. Cool thing. Let's go here. So this chart, uh, MACD, it is avoiding the cross to the downside on MACD. This was a nice move. Second standard deviation violation. Overbought conditions started to move. 5, 8. I was expecting a mean reversion, did not happen. It just bounced off of that 5 there. So still to the idea to the upside is this immediate trade, upside 162.70 area. I still doubt this. It will go all the way up here to the second standard deviation. However, because we need to chart it. The second standard deviation is sitting there. We want to keep that, an eye on that 160 to 70 area. And to the downside, this is what we're looking at: 159.17, 159 area. The one standard deviation just about there at the 158.80. But let's plot that once if it starts to come back down into the 5 at about 159 area. So downside 159, upside is about 162 70 area, per the daily chart. And look at this thing: classic, overbought, oversold, bounce. Cool thing. Let's go here. This chart, right? This chart is interesting, very, very, very interesting. Now, in a minute, we'll get into Microsoft as well. These things work in cycles, right? Overbought, oversold, same thing. Overbought, oversold, same thing, same thing, same thing. So if it comes back down, I was actually short last night. I was hoping for it to come back down below the 8. Did not happen. It bounced. So I exited this morning because it was trying to bounce, and I did not want to hold this trade furthermore. My understanding was that because this thing is overbought, it will come back down, and it will come back down at some point in time. Either these overbought conditions need to be resolved, either it would resolve by coming out of this zone, or by the RSI moving lower rapidly. Right? Either those two scenarios will happen, and this will get resolved, and probably will look for a move to the upside. However, if Apple doesn't move to the upside, very likely you will see, not any explosive moves in the indices, right? Uh, at least in the major indices. So still expecting this to be coming back down into the 8, then very likely here at about 160.16 area. Then if that breaches the mean river, very likely it will try to bounce here. But if it comes back down, if it breaches the half trend, very likely scenario it will come back into the mean. And if it does come back into the mean, very likely people will look. This will be here down, and then very likely we'll look for another bounce there. That's my idea. And why? Because we still want to see this get resolved. And if the SMI crosses here and starts to move back down, that's another reason for it to be short. Mean reversion looks like a decent idea right now. If I go down here on the 5 minute chart, 8 below 21 has happened right about here, right? So that's another thing. So we got to look out for these bounces, very clear bounces, right? Because Apple is in a strong mode. Anything or any major moving average it hits, it will start to bounce. Right. So if it breaches here, then the next stop very likely is here, and this will be a strong bounce again. Cool thing. And then if you are trading this thing, watch on the lower time frame, or rather watch the 1 hour time frame and trade on the lower time frame, right? Yeah, come back down, breach this. Very likely it will come back down and test this number and breach it, and come back into this number. Very likely look for another bounce. If that breaches, it will come back into this number. Very, very, very likely. Cool thing. But there is a lot of support around here. Cool. Right. Let's get into some Microsoft here. Here. Let's start with this 1 hour chart. So same scenario: overbought, oversold. And next, you can probably the probability of coming back into that oversold zone again is high. Uh, that's just how things work. So Microsoft and Apple, if these two are moving in tandem, very likely the the entire market will move in tandem with those two, right? So let's say if it starts to come back down alongside Apple, I'm expecting it to come back into the 5. That very likely a bounce here. That breaches, come back into this 8. That breaches, very likely scenario is this 281.50. If that breaches, expecting it to come back into the mean, and definitely not plotting anything sub this number 276.40. I think by the time it comes back down, it will get oversold again, and again we'll look for that bounce. So it is overbought here, but not as overbought as the ES, but definitely overbought on the 1 hour chart. So at least expectation is the 5. The least expectation here is the 5. That breaches, then we're looking for the 8, right? That's the idea here. And if the SMI crosses to the downside, very likely we'll take another position to the downside. And again, the overbought conditions might get resolved either by coming out of the zone, or by a means of RSI hitting the bottom again here. Same thing, if it comes back down, gets oversold here, I'll look for another bounce to the upside. Seasonally speaking, April is generally an upside month, and probably the selling might come start in May. So that whole thing where they say sell in May and go away or something like that. So that usually comes in during the summer months. However, I'm thinking this summer would be still different. I think the market will continue its move to the upside, and whatever the lows that you might get in April very likely would be the lows for the year. Barring anything I'm not seeing just now, barring anything that is probably hidden right now. If the market makes any lows, seasonally speaking, April is a very strong month to the upside. However, if for some reason market moves to the downside, and whatever lows that the market will make, those would be, for me, those would likely be the lows for the year. Cool thing. So yeah, Apple and Microsoft in the similar situation, and if both moves in tandem, very likely you will see. First thing, the correlation is higher to the tech heavy index, Nasdaq, or the Qs or SQs or TQs, whichever that you trade. So that would be heavier correlation. However, because I trade SPX, I will also be looking at the 13% correlation here start to move to the downside. Very likely it will bring SPX to the downside. Cool thing. Let's go here. Again, this is what I'm watching. And it hasn't crossed to the downside, but I am watching this thing carefully. It's opening up here, so very likely you will see the 5 moving up as well. And this thing is not, this is basically coming out of that whole AI thingy, right? And it seems like Microsoft has released a new Bing with integrated with ChatGPT now. So that is happening, and now their Office products are integrated with AI. So that is happening, and AI is already becoming, one of the probably one of the more consequential things in IT as of now. It hasn't impacted the real life just yet, but IT is very likely, changing at a very rapid pace right now. Cool thing. So let's say if it crosses to the downside, then we'll start to look for the downside. Until then, the upside is still here at about 288.20 area. Downside would still be the 5 wherever the 5 will open. So 2 standard deviation on the upside, 5 on the downside. That's still the idea there. But I will operate based on this chart, right? I will watch this chart, and I'll go down to the lower time frame here, and I will place my trades, or I'll manage my risk on the lower time frames. Let's see if we have a crossover here as well. No, we don't have a crossover here. There's no 8 below 21 here, right? So probably I'll wait either for the 5 below 8 if you are in a rush, or wait for 8 below 21 on the lower time frame and manage it that way. Right, let's open up this chart. Yeah, so this is what I was looking at, right? Microsoft. I did not remember this number, but this is what Apple and Microsoft are, more or less in the same cycle. However, Apple is a little bit more oversold than, overbought than Microsoft. Look at this Apple chart here. This is getting overbought here, and very likely if it hits a major resistance like a super trend or something, very likely it will give some of those gains. And if the selling intensifies, very likely it will come back into the 5. Same thing with Microsoft. However, it is not that overbought here, right? And it was oversold here, hitting a major moving average, moved up, fair enough, from 200 to 100, great. And if it hits there, likely scenario, people will start to move, rotate out of this name. What name they will pick, I don't know, but very likely scenario, it will hit this number, and people will look to rotate out of this name. 286.30 to 286.30, 287 area, very likely scenario. And yeah, if it's hitting this number, then you will see this, it is already overbought. Very likely you will also see the average RSI move up, and then likely scenario will at least see a breather to the downside. And if it crosses here during that breather to the downside, very likely it'll still come back. It'll try to at least try to come back into the zero line. That should give us the 5 and the 8 on Microsoft again. These charts are very similar. Microsoft and Apple charts are very similar. So the correlation between the Microsoft and Apple is higher. So that means you will have at least a predictable move in Qs, right? If you trade Qs, chart that. So Apple, Microsoft, whichever way those move, and Microsoft has a larger say in Qs versus SPX. So yeah, bear that in mind. Cool thing. Let's get into some of oil, maybe. Yeah, 5 8, and if oil clears here, then very likely we're looking at a push into 75 area, 74.90, and then the mean reversion at on the week at about 76.50 area. Let's see oil here. We wanted to see a breather here. Yesterday we got this breather. We wanted to see it come back into the mean. We got that one as well. So now if it bounces here at the mean, I'm expecting it to hit this number right about here at 74.20, 74.30. That clears, expecting it to move into 74.80 area. And I think they should hold. I think they should hold. And the MACD has crossed. We've been watching this number, this technical before it crossed, and now it crossed. Very likely scenario is that I think it should move up at least till the zero line. And that's the upside right about here, 74.25 area first. That clears 74.80 area. And to the downside, the mean and the 21 should act as decent support. 72.65 area, that breaches the 5, that breaches the 8. Likely scenario, it will not come back into the 8. But if it does come back into the mean, and if it breaches the mean for some reason, then we'll start to look into the 8. Unless then, we'll still assume that this is going to be a bounce spot. This will be a breather spot right here, upper inner Bollinger Band, 74.25. Very likely you'll see market, if it hits that and takes a breather from there, very likely scenario, the market will also start to take a breather alongside that. And I think if oil remains buoyant, a likely scenario is that market will remain buoyant. Let's get into a bit of DXY here. Yesterday, we were looking at this number here, right? The 5, and then if that clears the 8. The 5 pushed down, 8 did not happen. Today, it came back down, pushed up to 5, pushed up to 8, and again coming back down here. So if it the for now it remains the same. The idea remains the same. 5 and 8. I will not take DXY seriously until it clears the 8 on the day. If it does clear, then we are looking at this pushing all the way up here into 103.34. And if it happens that DXY clears the 8 on the day and starts to move up towards the 21 on the day, that's when you'll start to see the DXY start to see put some pressure, downward pressure on Apple and other tech tickers. And I still haven't figured out the story behind the yen and what is happening there. I'm sleeping very early these days, probably jet lag. I don't know what's happening there, but yeah. So I'll start to get into that Bloomberg, and once I start to pick up the stories, then I'll have more clarity over that whole thing. But yeah, so far, so the MACD is still crossed to the downside, and if until MACD crosses to the upside, this move will be to me this move would be temporary. However, look at this chart here. It is it is charting pale red bars. So the pale red bars are getting smaller, so very likely the selling is subsiding here. Might be a case that if it comes back up and hits the 8 and clears the 8, then we'll start to see a 21, a push into 21. If this happens, it will create some downward pressure, much needed downward pressure on the tech. Very likely you'll see the tech index move lower if it happens. Yeah, let's get into some of Tesla here. Tesla weekly, I think we were looking at the upside here at about 200, 201 area, and the downside was here at about 175, or rather, the downside was here at 186 area, something either this or this. I don't remember, but the range on the higher time frame remains the same. Very likely scenario if Apple pushes upside, I think Tesla will test this number today, 2000, sorry, 240, 250 area. If that clears, then likely scenario you will have a lot of resistance here, and the 50 should be it for Tesla. And Tesla, I don't know if it's okay. Let's get into this chart and then talk. Tesla. Tesla is the one out of all the big ones, which the MACD came very, very, very close to dipping below the zero line, but it did not. However, if let's say if it starts to dip below for some reason, if the selling starts to come back in into Tesla, the same thing. If it is above the one standard deviation today. If the push comes down, then very likely it'll come back into the one standard deviation on 9.4, then the 5, then the 8, then again the mean reversion should be it. If it starts to come back down, definitely the mean reversion will happen. And then definitely not plotting anything even for today and tomorrow, not plotting anything sub 184 for Tesla. This should act as pretty decent support for Tesla. And if if you see this thing cross to the downside, likely scenario will see Tesla come back down and test this number. However, bear in mind, I think Tesla has, I think April 2nd or 3rd, Tesla's Q1 numbers are coming out. Q1 deliveries numbers are coming out, and all the reports suggest that they will have a decent quarter, a rather very successful quarter. And I don't want to get in front of that trade with a short. So I will probably again. I think the IV will increase for Tesla, and I think I want to be on both side of the trade as a buyer and also as a seller of options, both sides. Right. And let's say Tesla clears this number here at about 200, 200, then very likely it's going to go hit this line here. And I think if it hits this line right about here, if it happens today, and 5 points, so 5 points is nothing for Tesla. If it starts to go right, and if it does hit this number, very likely scenario, I'll take a short right about here. It will get overbought right about here if it hits that, and very likely it will be a couple of points to the short side. Downside, again, this would be the threshold about 184. This was down here, I think, at 182. It has moved up to 184. That's a good thing. The 50 moving average is moving up. So that means there is a decent bit of strength in that. So larger game, 202 to the upside, 184 to the downside. Let's go here on the 1 hour chart. Where is Tesla? Right about here. Right. This is not like Apple. It is slightly overbought, but nothing like Apple or Microsoft. However, let's say if Apple and Microsoft move to the downside, this will follow to the downside. The same scenario, downside, the 5 breaches, the 8, very likely it'll bounce here again. It will be a battle here. And if that breaches the 8 and that breaches, very likely it'll come back into this number and mean reversion will happen on the hour. Not plotting anything sub this number today, 19130, 19. Let's round that up at 191 for Tesla. And for some reason, if it starts to breach that, then likely scenarios we're looking at again this number here, but definitely not plotting anything sub 185 for Tesla, even for tomorrow. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it'll, if it comes back down, it'll bounce here at the 200 moving average on the hour again, unless I'm not seeing something that I should be seeing. Unless that is the case, I'm yeah. For the week, probably today or tomorrow, I don't see Tesla coming back down into below 185 as of now. Uh, Today, we could expect if Apple starts to move lower, we could expect the mean reversion and probably the 50. And tomorrow, if the selling intensifies, then likely scenario is this. Cool thing. Anything else in particular? Bitcoin, I wanted to do Bitcoin. Just quickly touch on that. Bitcoin, look at this thing, right? It is avoiding the same fate, but it will cross to the downside. There is nothing that is saying overbought as of now, but what is happening is the IV, or rather the range, the volatility has expanded here, and this was pretty tamed throughout the Feb month and all that, and now it has expanded. So idea is for it to come back down, right? So if it starts to come back down, then very likely it will start to create this downward pressure. If the correlation is still available, that Bitcoin and tech, very likely scenario it will start to come back down. Although for this to happen, I think there has to be a pressure from US 10 or DXY. Right now, neither of them are creating a downward pressure. So likely scenario that technicals will take over 5, 8, and the mean reversion is all the way down here, at 26.5 area. So let's see how that goes. 1 minute to open. Let's move into live.